Welcome to The Unsidelined Life, the podcast that challenges and encourages women to stop denying themselves a full life and to step boldly into the opportunities God is preparing for you. Join me for raw insights and engaging conversations to guide your journey of self-discovery and pursue the life that God created for you. Welcome everyone to The Unsidelined Life. This is Eileen Noyes, your host. I am excited about this one. Okay, as you could see,
yes.
Because of who I have on the show today, I'm wearing some Packer gear. And here's the thing, I don't think I ever have. There's wives that have the jerseys all blinked out. I never had that. I just maybe wore a little bit of green and gold, but I just kind of dressed to a game. So I probably wasn't the best supporting person in that sense, but I am. So I bought, and I'm just gonna give you a heads up, I bought this sweater last year during playoffs. I called this lady in Green Bay, I saw it, she showed something at our store. And so I'm like, hey, can I get one? The day I got it was the day after they lost. So I never wore it. So it says love on it. So I am a legit Jordan Love fan. I was not really a fan for years just because I never really watched, and my boys got me into it. So I'm Packered out. These are leaves, but they look kind of like footballs. So I want to do it as a kind of what's the word? I'm looking for this word, Jeanne Bruette. I have a dear, amazing woman on the show today. She has been the executive assistant to Ron Wolf, and he's Ron Wolf, Mark Hatley, and Ted Thompson. Now, I should know this answer, but are they the presidents or the GMs, or which one are they?
Ron Wolf was a general manager, and then Mark Hatley was hired as the vice president of football operations because Mike Sherman was coach and GM at that time. And then it went back to Ted Thompson, who was the general manager.
So, and this is 21 years.
Yes, a little over 21 years.
And then, of course, I want to get her to speak, but she's also wife of a pastor, Pastor Jeanne Bruette. So he used to be our pastor. I have a little bit of a story with that. And you have 3 kids. And I hate saying, what's another word for kids and daughters? Because I'm like,
children.
Yeah, children. What's another word for kids and children that are adults instead of, do you say adults?
That's right. Yeah, okay. They're adults.
Okay, so you have 2 beautiful daughters and 1 son, is that right?
Yes,
okay.
1 son.
Okay, so I before I have her, introduce herself and how she got connected to the Packers, I do want to say that even just dialoguing through email and messaging, we don't know each other very well, but it almost feels like we do. And I say that, just seeing her work at the Packers and then seeing her at church, it's just a woman who I've always admired from a distance. You have such a beauty and a strength about you, which is so many of the reasons why I wanted you on here. But I just think that you're going to be an amazing inspiration for the women that are younger, in my mix, older. So I'm so appreciative of you. The one story I want to say really quick is, so as Packers, as people in the limelight, it's really hard to find a church where you just kind of feel like, there's that reality is a feeling of exploitation, or you're a Packer, you get to be in our church, or you're a football player, So we had to do. It was weird. It's almost like we had to do a lot of, which I hate saying it, but church shopping. And this is years. So I feel like we've gone through so many different churches in Green Bay, not to say that they're bad, but to find a fit for you and your family, that's just hard to do. And so I remember starting at your church, Living Hope, and just feeling this sense of relief after all these years. I don't even know how many years we were there, but I had lunch with your daughter, and I was just like, Christy, this is so great. Like, I'm so excited that we just found this church. It feels like we're not anybody, we fit right in. And she starts getting teary and she's like, he's retiring. So I don't know if you remember the time, and I'm like, no. So he did retire, and Pastor Mike took over. But it was just like, oh, like the one time I felt like home. I thank God we found another church that became home for us. But I was like, oh man, like it, I think he had maybe did a couple more sermons, and then he retired. I think he went on somewhere else, but I was like, oh. So yeah, so that was, you guys have always been near and dear to me. I will always remember, and I think the last time I had talked to your husband, same thing. The best is yet to come, and for sure, I held on to that through the hardest moments, and so I just wanted to share that. But Jeannie, I will give you the mic, and just to let you talk about like how you connect with the Packers. So I definitely have a lot of different questions here, but just wanted to let you take the stage.
Yeah. Well, I'm Jeanne Bruette. I'm a child of the King. I am so grateful for God's moving and developing the character of Christ within me. And you brought up the quote, and I think I'll say it right now. My daughter Becky had given me a book a couple of years ago for Christmas called Rising Strong by Brene Brown. And the quote is, I believe that vulnerability, the willingness to show up and be seen with no guarantee of outcome, is the only path to more love, belonging, and joy. And I think when I read it, I thought, wow, that really fits my life. And, as a wife, I remember those early years. We didn't have our first child till about 2.5 years after we were married. But even marriage, you come in with preconceived ideas, or you think your home's going to be just like what you had, and so there's adjustment all the time. And I still say that now. Life is a series of adjustments. We're constantly adjusting. And I think if I did not have my rock, my foundation in the Lord, I would not be able to navigate those adjustments. And I'm just so grateful. So, mothering, and I was a stay-at-home mom. And my husband was a teacher when we first got married. He was an English teacher. Then he got his degree in a master's in reading. And then we were down in southern Wisconsin for 5 or 6 years when he was teaching. Then we came back to Green Bay because he got the job at East Pier as the reading specialist. And so this is 10 years he's been in professional work, but we've always been involved with the church. I went off to college and went into music. And so the music really helped me. We got involved in church. I played the piano. I sang. That developed when we moved back to Green Bay. I actually directed cantatas for 10 years in our church, used all of that ability. But there were situations in my life, and I was happy being a mom. I had always wanted to be a mom. People would ask me, even when I was a kid into a teenager, what do you want to be? I want to be a mom. I was a neighborhood babysitter. I have 4 brothers. The oldest was 2 years older than me, and then the 3 were younger than me. So I was their second mom.
Oh
And
yeah.
that really developed the skills for momming, being a mom and that neighbor. And I always thought that the coolest people on this earth were kids, were children. I just loved kids. So I wanted to stay home. And I did stay home and then move on to when all my kids were in school. And Chet was in 3rd grade, Becky was in 5th, and Christy was in 7th. Had an opportunity to go to work for another church in their office, just part-time. And it was 9 to 2 every day. So my kids were off before I left, and I was home before they got home. I thought, this is my perfect fit.
Perfect. Yes.
But I always wanted to keep learning. And this was when computers were coming out, and God used that because they paid for me to learn Microsoft on the job. And, it just started giving me those business skills and move forward then after 5 years. And I'm still part-time. And then I get the opportunity to work for a home appraiser and inspector and become his office manager. But it was still part-time. And that was 3 more years. And I really learned accounting and just everything that went with that job. My son, by then, Christy was in college, Becky went to tech school in Madison, and Chet was a junior in high school. And I had a friend who managed the Kelly services, that hiring service. And she contacted me and said she had an opening at a place which would be just part-time. I wasn't a Kelly girl, but she knew my skills. And she said, you don't have to take the test. But if you would go there, a lot of times it would be for 6 weeks that I'll be a Kelly person. And then if they like you, they'll hire you. And long story short, it was for the Green Bay Packers. And I thought, wow, and I'm a girl. You and I relate in so many ways, having a male-dominated family. I grew up loving sports. I was sport-minded myself. I loved track. I loved, it was all before the great opportunities for women in sports. I was before that. So even basketball, it was 3 dribbles and pass the ball and, all those silly
Oh my
little
gosh.
rules that
Yeah.
girls
Yes.
had. Yeah. And, but I love sports. Matter of fact, even when I went into college, I was debating, do I go into Phi Ed or do I go into music? But I felt music was my gift and I went into that. But long story short, so I started at the Packers, just part-time, on the switchboard. And see, God prepares you all the time.
Yes.
My dad always used to say, God won't take you from A to Z, but it's every step along the way. And each step prepares you for the next thing.
Good, for sure.
So
Absolutely.
my first job when we were married and 4 kids, I worked at Hurlbut Calcium and Chemical, which had an office downtown Green Bay, and Fred Garner, whose family, they owned the company, and he had hired me. He was a wonderful Christian man, and I was on the switchboard there and did light payroll and things like that. So I had switchboard experience and started at the Packers and just helped out with other little things, during my part-time job. And that was in 1993. And in 1994, in January, my husband and I had come home from church. At that time, then, Jerry is a youth pastor for Living Hope Church,
Your
and we're
pastor's wife,
both
yeah, which is a whole other
totally
thing.
involved in ministry. Jerry and I would say from the get-go, Christ was at the center of our lives, and we always wanted to serve. However, we just felt God leading us. And when he stepped in, he was 3 years at East of Pier High School, and then Living Hope Church had opened up, and they needed a youth pastor. They wanted a Christian ed person. They also were studying about Christian school and what to do in that area. So we really felt led of the Lord. This was of God, and then we started with the youth group, which was wonderful experience for us. But we were older youth group pastors. My husband, was,
Yeah, which is not common anymore.
35, 36 years old. And we did that for 10 years and a wonderful 10 years. And we get home from church and I get a call from Ron Wolf. And actually not Ron Wolf. My boss at the time was Phil Pionic. And he called me and he said, Jeanne, Ron just called me and he'd like you to come over to the office. He said, I know it's Sunday afternoon, but, if it's okay. And I said, sure. I said, what's up? He said, well, his girl quit and he needs someone in the office because it's, pre-draft and they're getting ready to go to the combine in February. And he'd just like you to come in and interview for the job and then do some work for him while you're there. So I said, okay. And I said to Jerry, let's just pray because Eileen, I never did anything just spur the moment or I didn't want emotions. I wanted to be led of God and these things take time. But I said to Jerry, here's my fleece. I'm praying that I'll either feel really good about this by the time I leave, or I'm going to feel really bad. And I said, this is so opposite of me. I believe it's just got to be God showing me.
Wow.
So I know you read my script. I went in there and Ron was in his office and he kind of leaned back in his chair and he said, well, what do you think? And in my mind, I go, that's the first question I get for an interview. What do you think?
About
And
what?
I just laughed. But I just said, Ron, I said, I love what I'm doing here. I love the job. I love meeting the public. I love the phone work. The staff here. It's just been incredible. I love what I'm doing. And he kind of leaned back and he said, you know what, Jeanne? Not everybody can say that about their job. And I said, well, I feel bad for those people. I said, because I really do. So then the interview moved on and there were things like, well, how far away do you live from the stadium? I thought, oh boy. And other things that just kept going on. I was there for 4 hours and things just went on that really, frankly, by the time I left, Eileen, I did not feel good about it. I felt like God was always prioritizing my life. And God and his work was first. Well, family, right up there, my family. And he wanted me to work from 9 to 6. And Wednesday nights, our youth group started at 6:15. He asked, there might be quite a few Saturdays and Sundays that I need you. And I'm going, oops, this is not good. I'm going to lose control of my life.
Wow. Oh
And
my.
went home, and Jerry and I talked for an hour and a half. And I said, I need to call Ron now. And I said, I just need to be fair. I said, he had even said when I left, Jeanne, why don't you just come and work for us for a week? And then you can just make your decision and let us know. So I called him and I just said, Ron, I feel so honored that you called me in to interview. And I told him, my husband and I talking, we're involved in the church, all these things. And Ron, when I was on the switchboard, he'd call in a lot, but Ron was very succinct. He didn't have this engaging personality on the phone. And so it's just dead silent when I'm telling him all this stuff. But just at the last, I said, but Ron, if you want me to come up and help you until you find someone, I'd be more than happy to do that. Dead silence. And then he just says, thanks, Jeanne. Click. And I thought,
Oh
oh
my
no,
God.
I just said no to the general manager and I'm done with any other job opportunities. It's just like, that's not going to happen. So I get to work the next morning and 10 minutes after 8, I get a call from my boss, Phil, and he says, Jeanne, Ron just called me and he'd like you to come up and help until they find someone. Oh, I thought, well, I guess I really didn't, lose an opportunity. So basically, Eileen, I went up there for 2 weeks. I picked his brain. I had to ask him about everything because he wasn't like someone who'd train you on the job, but learned how to do the waiver transactions. Margaret Myers, who was Bob Harlan's assistant at the time there too, she helped me with the waiver transactions, all that piece of it. Ron was a statistician. He'd come out. He handed me this legal sheet after one day that I'd been there, and he said, would you make me about 20 copies? Well, it had all the positions for offense on one side and all the positions for defense on the other. And he would sit and watch film and he'd put the college and the player and the number. And when he was watching film, he'd jot down the notes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this thing looked like it had been mimeographed. And I know kids don't know what mimeographing is anymore, but it was just so black and dirty. And I said, well, Ron, can I clean this up for you in the computer? And, well, sure. So, like I said, every form he had, whether it was how he graded the players, the scouting things, he'd hand them to me and I'd clean them up, put them in the computer and the charts and graphs and do all of that. Well, after 2 weeks, I was falling in love with the job and I'd go home and I'd say, Jerry, pray. I love it. I love the people there. I tell you, I feel like working for Ron. It just fits like a glove. It's
Wow.
it's just amazing. And a girl was supposed to come after 2 weeks, but she had called. Her dad ended up in hospice, and she couldn't come. So I'm working 2 more weeks. So it's 4 weeks. And at the end of that, on Friday, Ron came out and he said, Jeanne, he said, we're bringing in a girl on Monday who's going to take the position here. So I'm leaving on Tuesday for the combine. So I want you to train her for the week. Oh, I went home that night. I was heartbroken. I said, Jerry, I don't understand what's going on, but I love what I do. I just feel like it's the perfect fit, but what's happening? So she came in on Monday. Ron left on Tuesday. There were so many different things that went on with her. It was amazing. But by Thursday, I have her in my chair and I'm singing another, and she's, taking over. And she gets a phone call and she's all excited. Yes, yes, okay, I will. She hangs up. She turns around and looks at me and she said, that's my old boss. He wants me to come back. I quit.
Oh my God.
I couldn't believe it. Number one, the unprofessionalism, the whole
Yeah.
thing. Not 10 minutes later, Brian Broaddus, who was our college, our coaching college administrator, he called from Indianapolis because he was there with Ron. Well, Jeanne, how's it going? And Brian and I worked just side by side in that office, and he was just a great guy. And well, very interesting. And I told him, and he said, let me talk to her. So he talked to her and he said, basically, type up a letter while you're leaving, go put it on the CFO's desk, and bye-bye. So he said, Ron and I have wanted you in there from the very beginning. And he said, he was a Texas boy, so he always called him Mr. Wolf. He said, I'm going to talk to Mr. Wolf and we're going to see what we can't do to get you to stay there. So I never heard a thing that day. Friday, all day I worked, never heard anything. And finally, Friday about 5:00, Ron called me. He said, Jeanne, tell me what went on. So I just started from day 1, 2, and I'm getting into the third day. And like I said, Ron on the phone, he's just silent. He doesn't engage you. Or I said, am I talking like Chatty Cathy here? Am I just giving, No, he said, I want to hear the whole thing. So I told him, and at the end, he said, Jeanne, he said, I want you to go home, talk to your husband, and write down the things that you need in order for us to keep you on the job.
Wow.
That was just so God. And I started work then 8:30 to 5:30. That fit in just fine. And I found out, Eileen, my work ethic, my organization, all those things were getting done, whereas before apparently they hadn't. And then I found out working in and getting involved in football. Yes, there were now like draft. Well, after Super Bowl, the scouts come back in and they have their meetings for 3.5 weeks. Those were very long days with Ron. I worked 8 till about 7:30, quarter to 8 at night. There were weekends, and then of course the draft, which then was only 2 days, but they were like 15 or 18-hour days. And I'm in the hub and draft. I took the phone calls back then before they had all the nice speed dialing, and we did a draft trade pick sheet that I'd always, any trades, I had to put those on and print them off and get them into the guys in the draft room, and all of those things. But and enough of that part of the story. But how God honored that, and God knew, Eileen, in that office. And I learned, even when I started just helping, and his files were such a mess. The folders were just, hadn't been. So I asked him, I said, can I redo your filing and box away the year? And yes. And I said, I know it's all confidential, but is that okay? And he said, no, go for it. But it is a very confidential office. And God knew, because I've never been a gossip. I've never been into fan worship, worshiping celebrities. That's not me. God had given me early on just that love for people, people for who they are. And I found, because then my next role that Ron gave me, after, I think it was 1 or 2 years after that, because Shirley Leonard was in public relations, and she had always done the player insurance. And she had cancer, and then she had to retire. But Ron asked me to take on the player insurance role also, which was at certain times of the year was added on more. But I thank God for that, Eileen, because God had given me a love for these young men who all different backgrounds. But I just saw them as people, and I knew that they were in such a demanding profession because it's all based on performance. And you make it or you don't. And I would, when training camp started, the administration day, I had all their packets ready. I got to present the little PowerPoints for the insurance and what I could do for them, what they needed to do. They'd fill out the forms. But I always said, listen, I said, you may think that only the coaches care about you. I said, but I want you to know many of us on staff care about you, and we care about success in your life. And that has a lot of different meanings. But I said, I hope you grow as a person here, and I hope you can find things in your life that will help you grow as a. And God always gave me that opportunity to speak to them.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
it was so wonderful. I remember Robert Ferguson. He was one of these receivers that
Okay. Yes.
they had drafted him, and then he sat basically for 2 years on the depth chart. He was like fifth or sixth in a receiver, but he kept improving. I talked to him. Then he got married one summer, and so I just sent a little message. Just be sure now and get me that marriage certificate. So we have that for. And he came into my office and had it, and I said, Robert, I'm so proud of you. I said, because a lot of people, I see it all the time, they don't take care of their things. Plus, I said, you care enough about this woman that you made her your wife. And, just being able to speak into them like that was such a blessing. Yeah. And I always saw them as people. And working as the general manager's assistant, and Green Bay is such a little town, and, we have people in the community, they have their stock, and so they are a shareholder, so they feel very free to call up the general manager and voice their opinions. And of course, they don't get the general manager, they get me.
Yeah, because they're owners, so they're like the bosses.
Yeah, and I answered a lot of very interesting phone calls, and God had taught me too that you don't add fuel to the fire, and that's why a soft answer truly does turn away wrath. And there's some. I tell you, one of the hardest years was when Ray Rhodes became the head coach. He had come from Philadelphia. And we ended up being 8-8 that year. It was not a good year. But every game we lost, I'd come in on Monday morning, and my voicemail was full.
I can't believe that.
And I would listen to it, and every one of them was a fan from Philadelphia, calling and talking about blah 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 the coach and blah, And so I just delete. It was amazing. So those kind of things, if they left a voicemail, I never dealt with it, but they would call sometimes. They'd say, well, what about that, blankety blank, and I'd say, sir, just a minute now, just calm down. I want you to know I'm here. I listen to what the fans have to say, and I do pass that on to the general manager. I said, you're not going to be able to talk to him because he's at practice or he's in the draft room watching film. But I said, I will listen to you. But if you're going to swear at me, I said, then I'm going to have to hang up on you. And most of the time they'd have but there'd be the time where I'd just keep on swearing. So bloop, I'd just hang up on him, I'm not going to put up with that.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's a little bit of my background on the history of that.
Wow. But I'm writing down things, and just hearing your story, I just think, wow, the principles of seeking God first. Just the different things. So let me, as I hear you, your priorities, your God first, your marriage, your family, you sought the Lord to say, hey, this is like, can I do this? Does this work with my family? Like, I look at all those things and I just think, wow, it's like, I see how God has used you. And this is my heart for women, is to say, you know what, God, there's something stirring in me. The fact that you loved what you were doing, and you went home and you talked to Jerry and you're like, hey, can we pray about this? You did things in order. And so God blessed you. He honored you in that way. And so that's so good to see. And I just think, like, I think of moms when we're so caught up in that role that we have this thing that, well, we don't have this degree or this
Mm-hmm.
schooling, but I'm sure that all that you did, just like you said, experience taught you and help you go to these next levels. And so
Yeah.
even though you didn't have all these degrees and other jobs, you brought so much to the table for him, for Ron Wolf, and I'm sure every other GM that followed, that man, all that like the organizational skills. I, I mean, I'm looking right now at my room, and right now it's like a hot mess, or well, the room, my bedroom. And I know that I've got kids and, all these things. And sometimes I can think, oh my gosh, like my life is so chaotic and crazy. But at the same time, there has to be order and organization that I'm looking at this going, okay, yeah, it's a mess. But you have to, as a mom, you have to have the problem solving mindset. And so I see that you did that for them in a way where it's like you carried over those things. So for example, for me, it's like, okay, I think I'm messy, but really, I know that when it comes down to it, there are so many things that I take for granted that it's just part of my life of organizing, making sure things are getting done. So as
Mm-hmm.
chaotic as it could be, it's like, nope, there are things that got to get done, so it's like, so I see how valuable it is that all that you took from mothering, from making sure that you're there with Jerry, taking the things that you learned from the church, and then you're bringing it to the marketplace, which is so needed. Like, I just look, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, how awesome is that
Yes.
you were
Yeah.
able to not only be mom to your own family, but you were
Yes.
mother all these to all these men, to them, and I'm sure you probably met some wives, but your impact was so great. And so I think your husband benefited from, or still benefits from, how amazing you are. Your children do, and then so did the community in so many
Yeah.
ways, for so many years, so many years. So that, like, I just think like that, I don't know, it's so inspiring. And the fact that you
Yeah.
like built trust, with him, or
Yes.
they trusted you. So
Yeah.
go ahead. I was gonna, do you want to say something?
Yeah. I think when I first gave my heart to the Lord, I was 14.
Okay.
I'm so grateful that I was that young. Um, my home I grew up in for the first 10 years was not Christ based. My
Mhm.
parents were not Christians. There was turmoil, there was arguing, there was mom and dad were not getting along. And then Christ came into the home, and oh my goodness, the changes that occurred there. And by the time I was 15, my dad was in the newspaper business at the time, and that's what moved us to Green Bay. He became the production manager of the Press Gazette. And my prayer was, God, I just want to be used by you. And you get into the church, and so much of this is my perception when I was a teenager, that a missionary would come and speak, or an evangelist, and I just had such a desire to do what God wanted me to do. I would always go up to the altar. I'd be praying. I'd say, God, show me what you want me to do. And I think there are a lot of people's even perceptions, because I heard later, like, oh, are you going to be a missionary? Are you going to be a?
Mhm.
I would say, listen, I don't know what I'm going to be. I just want to be available for what He has for me.
So
I didn't
good.
want any preconceived ideas or someone else. And I think, Eileen, it's because I had to fight very hard for my own independence because of a very strong male dominated father. It was very patriarchal in our family. And when Christ, there was love that filled all of it, but he still, that imposing strong strength that you just didn't buck him, you just didn't. And so when I went off to college, and I was 17 when I graduated, and when I went off to college, I felt such a sense of freedom because I knew I could make my own decisions and they would be good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be going crazy. I had confidence in God in my life. And I will say that that was a part of my dad's parenting, that he did instill me with confidence. Because with those three younger brothers, we camped in the summers, and my dad loved the outdoors, so I just got that love from him. But I had to take care of my little brothers. And you know what? I loved it. They were filling that pool within me that needed love in healthy ways. And my dad, when he'd go out swimming or whatever, he'd say, Jeannie, you show those boys how to do it. He'd always say, Jeannie, you show the boys how to do it. It was just great. So that part of it is just like, well, anything those guys could do, I could do too. So I'm just saying that when I really prayed, even in that process of praying about whether I'd get that job or not, the Lord gave me 2 Corinthians 2:15. And this from the New Living translation is, and it's about the aroma of Christ. Well, he said, our lives are a Christ-like fragrance rising up to God. But this fragrance is perceived differently by those who are being saved and by those who are perishing. But he just confirmed in my heart, the Holy Spirit, that I would be the aroma of Christ, that they would get this sense of love and caring, and that is so all Christ.
Yeah.
And it would be Christ flowing out of me. And Eileen, that's how I always wanted to live my life. And when Jerry became a youth pastor, there's the other side of me too, Eileen, that I never wanted to forget what it was like to be in the world and not have Christ. And I think God was pushing me. Even when my kids were little, I started going to the YW, to the aerobics class. I wanted to get out. I wanted to be out with other people, so I could keep that contact with how people think, how they feel, where their hurts are, what are they dealing with, that I might be used by God. And so we should not fear the world. We don't have to fear the world when God gives us everything that we need in order to live this life. And so for me, I guess that's the thing that I really wanted to speak to women in the church. And Eileen, I married a man. God led me to Jerry. Like I said, Christ was first in our lives, and we wanted to serve, and it was always together. And Jerry always, if there would have been a time or an opportunity, if I'd had the time to do the credentialing and papers for pastoring, I would have. But I didn't have the time. With a full-time job I had, plus everything I did at church. But in my husband's eyes, I was called of God. I was used of God right alongside of him. And when we taught our adult Wednesday night Bible studies, it was co-teaching. And there were many Sundays where it was co-preaching. My husband honored me. He believed in me. And my husband was ordained with the Assemblies of God, who from their very first institution, they accepted and believed in women ministers. That women were called as much as men. And I so appreciate that, because Christ is the head of the church. He did place the man, the head of the family, but Christ is the head of the church. And there is neither Jew nor Gentile, male nor female. We are all equal, and we all have the freedom to serve him as he calls us. It's his calling. It isn't man telling us what to do or saying, oh, I don't think, or no. When we have the power of the Holy Spirit within us and sensing and his directing and guiding us, he calls us. He gives us the calling. And I tell you, Eileen, that calling, those over 21 years at the Packers, I was healed of so many hurts, habits, and hang-ups in my life through that job. And it
Wow.
wasn't a job, it was a calling. And God
Yes.
was healing me through all of that beautiful. And I know you can relate to this because you're experiencing the same thing. And you are wanting to speak into women that have been hurt and downgraded and brought down and limited.
Yeah.
And with God, there are no limits.
Yeah.
There's freedom in Christ, real freedom.
Wow. You covered so much. I'm trying to think if there's questions that, I mean, well, a couple things that I also see is there's the seasons. You waited, which is what I'm doing. Like, you waited until your kids were in school, and so, like, I think about, like, I just came from this event. It was for young moms. And so I had to be mindful to say, hey, I am no longer in that season. All the things
Yes.
that I'm doing now, it's for this season. And during that season, it was all about the diaper change and all about
Yeah.
the cabinets being locked and struggling to get the baby into the car seat, all those things. And so there's different
Right.
stages, but they end, it's like embrace that time. Know that even in the monotony and the mundane, like you're serving Christ. You're working on, just those things, those skills that will carry over. Like, that's not everything. Embrace it, enjoy it, even in its hardest, but it's gonna carry over, and the role, the seasons change. So I
Yeah.
just want to, like, encourage and, like, hey, during that time, do something that fills you so that you don't
Yes.
forget your skills, your gifts, your passions. But just
Yep.
know, all that I do, there's a bigger picture than what you see. And so you just, like, totally described everything. I'm almost at a loss for words because I'm just thinking, wow, you nailed it all. And this is exactly, like I said, this is exactly what I call, like, a lady Bellator. You said it. You're the
Yes.
daughter of the king, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're the wife, you're the mom outside of your biological kids, and you serve your
Yes.
community. You've made an amazing impact. And then at the same time, as you're doing that, I'm sure that your family is seeing you being fulfilled, which probably still, it just allows them to see another side of
Yeah.
you. I love that my kids are excited that I'm joyful, or that I'm, doing
Yes.
things. And there's just a balance, and I don't want to say balance because there's never total balance. There's a juggling and the seasons, and I call it, like, the
Hmm.
buckets. It's like
Absolutely. Yes.
there's buckets. No, none of them are going to be filled equally. So some
Hmm.
days it could be more in this one area, and so
Yes.
I so appreciate all that you
Yeah.
said, and getting back to even the first quote that you said. That is huge. I'm gonna give a little situation. So as I'm stepping into, all these things, the writing, the speaking, now the
Yep.
podcast, which totally fills me. So it gives me an
Right.
opportunity to keep priorities straight. So I
Right.
can do this in my own time. It gives me that. It allows the heaviness of what I've gone through and helping other people. There's definitely a heaviness to
Hmm.
it, but
Yes.
there needs to be this, like, joy and excitement. And so the podcast, reconnecting with people, that is a part that's like, okay, there's the heaviness, but this is like the joyful, fun things that I know that is still helping people out. It's encouraging women. I know that people hearing your story, it's going to be super encouraging for them. And like you said, so last night I was talking to my husband, and I said I'm going to be stepping it up in terms of PR. So I'm going to get more out there. I'm going to be doing different things. And, like, he was asking me, and I think this is a men versus women thing. He was asking me for details that I couldn't give. And I was just like, I just, I don't know, I don't know all the steps. I just know I'm listening to God, I'm hearing him. And, like I just know that this is the next step. And every time I've done that, it's just like, I guess it's like the wife instincts, that kick in, where
Yeah.
I think a man wants to know details, or he wants to know like the educational side of the logistics, and a wife can sometimes go, you know what, that doesn't feel right, or yes, this does, and it's like we
Yeah.
can't explain it, right? And so
Yeah.
me being 3 years new in this marriage, it's like I have to remember, you know what, just because I can't fully explain it doesn't mean it's wrong. And so I just felt like when I read, I think it was after dinner, I went and read the information you gave me. And when I read that quote, and if you could read it again, I felt
Yeah.
like it's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't know the outcome. So yeah, if you don't mind reading
Yeah.
it.
I'll read it again, but I want to share this first because
Okay.
I'm so proud of you and answering God's call. And Elaine, the thing I have shared more often now that God brings people into our lives. God is the one that brings people into our lives. And it's all for our good and for our healing. And He'll continually heal you, Eileen. And even through this, and I want to share, I had read this in a book, sharing our stories with friends and loved ones builds trust, helps us process our experiences, and helps us learn from one another's experiences.
Yes.
And that's what you're doing. And this is a wonderful process of your own healing. You're not only going to help others, but your own healing will continue. And I know this because there were parts of my life. I've been involved in Celebrate Recovery. That's been since we retired, and my daughter Christy was in it and got us into it. We went to a conference in Nashville 5 years ago. It just blew me away. I became part of the leaders. I've led I went through the step studies, led with step studies. Hurts, habits, and hangups are with everyone. We
Yes.
were all born into this broken world, and and it's helped me so much going through that process. And of course, a great Christian counselor has helped me. But that's why I said to you, I'll never forget my counselor when I was sharing things about work. And she said, Jeannie, do you realize how much God was healing you through all of this? Boom, light goes on, It's so true. And I know for you, Eileen, that the continuing process of healing those hurts and habits and hangups, and we all have that baggage that we took with us, and
Yes.
uh, telling and sharing, speaking our truth in love is what brings freedom to us. It brings that out. And like I said, I think because of the home I grew up in, I was not babied. By the time I was 10 and my brother was 12, we could run the household.
Yeah.
We did everything. And but I always say to people, I'm so glad because I was prepared for life when I left home. But here's the quote from Brené Brown. I believe that vulnerability, it's our willingness to show up and be seen with no guarantee of outcome, is the only path to more love, belonging, and joy. Oh, I
Yes.
truly believe that. Uh, you know, God didn't promise us an easy life. He said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, but my burden is light. And I think of that because there are a lot of years, Eileen, even me being a pastor's wife and the challenges of that. And I took on a lot of things that were not meant for me to take on.
Wow.
But
Okay.
I had to learn through that. I had to learn and go through painful and hurtful things. But that's part of our life, part of the process. And then God brings the right people into my life to speak truth. And oh, wow. And then I'm released. God gives me release from that. And I realize more now, Eileen, than ever, how much do I control? The only thing I control is what I give to my God, to let Him control it.
Yeah.
Really, that's it. I pray. I every day I pray for my children, their spouses, our grandchildren. 9 beautiful grandchildren. They're all growing up, but we just place them in God's care. We do what we can to love them and speak into them when He gives us the opportunity. But God's in control. God's in control, and He's also taught me, Eileen, that we're part of His kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is here. on
Yes.
earth. And
Yes.
we do not have to be concerned. God knows what the outcome is in this world of ours, in our country of ours. I'm
Hmm.
not going to get all wrapped up and anxious and angry. I'm going to pray.
So
I will
good.
vote, but that is my personal choice. And I'm not getting on a rampage or on somebody's wagon, No, I'm part of the kingdom of heaven, and God's in control, and He controls it all.
Yeah.
And we see signs getting closer to the end more so than ever. Flooding and diversities and wars and rumors of wars and all of this. And I just get excited. And I get excited that you're continuing in the calling of God. If we continue in the calling of God, we will touch the lives of the people that God wants us to touch.
Yes.
We don't
Yes.
have to worry about anything else, but God brings those people into our life.
Wow, Jeannie,
So
it is
that's sermon
been
number 2.
keep preaching. I love it. I knew I knew that that I would so be blessed by
Oh,
having this time with you. And I one thing, we'll close with this. Like, I know that you had, when I was down, when I was in the thick of
yeah.
things, I remember going up and just praying, just praying and getting out of my seat and just praying and crying. And I remember feeling that touch from you. And we were both going, okay, I don't remember what you said, but I know that
Yeah.
it did have to do with the fact that you were encouraging me that I was strong and that God wasn't done. It was just something I know I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And you were a
Yeah.
part of that. I'll never forget that. And so
Oh,
your like your service to the Lord, your love for the Lord, continues. Its legacy way beyond, and it's so not just through the Bruette family. It is through me and all those people that you touched.
yeah.
And I mean, wow, like you lived out your calling and you're continuing to, and I love it because
Yeah.
it could be so intimidating, especially when you're in that man's world. But you pushed
Yes.
through and you were such a light.
Yes.
And it's like I almost think of, I think of the women that were with Jesus and the
Yeah.
first ones who they saw him, resurrected, they saw him out of the tomb. And it's just like, God, Jesus is just so good like that to say,
Yeah.
hey,
And
daughter,
he called them out, and he called them out to be included right up equal with the disciples. He
yes,
he called them. He raised women up to where they should have been. It's the fall that just destroyed everything. But Christ came to restore all of that God had in place. And like I said again, there is male nor female, but we are all equal in God's sights, and we have been raised to the level that He wants us to be, and valued to the level that He wants us to be valued.
I love it. Love it. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you so much. Please tell your family hi. You have absolutely made my day, and I know that you're going to. This one is going to keep carrying over and touching
Oh,
a lot of people. So thank you so much.
bless you. And let's keep connected. Pray for you every day. And God will continue to use you and heal you and build you up and encourage you and strengthen you. Our help only comes from the Lord God Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And He is our stronghold, and He is our strong tower. And He walks before us. So that is my prayer for you, Eileen, that you would just understand and sense and believe and continue to trust He walks before you. He walks before you, and He'll lead your steps, and your beautiful family that you've poured so much into, and how God is just, He restores all of that the old enemy would want to take away. He is the restorer. He's the redeemer and the restorer. And I love you, and let's keep in touch.
I love you too. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Until next time, love well, celebrate your strength, and discover the new things you are capable of. You are a light in the lives of those around you, and no night is too dark for you to find your way.